It didn't come with ceremony, no balcony, no warning, just a cold, calculated confirmation that sent shockwaves through palace corridors. Meghan Markle had been officially removed from the royal fold. But what truly stunned insiders wasn't the decision itself, it was the truth that forced William, Prince of Wales, to act. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The atmosphere inside the palace shifted instantly, as if an invisible line had been crossed, one that could never be redrawn. Reports suggest that senior aides were not prepared for the speed of the announcement, with some only learning moments before it was quietly confirmed through internal channels. There was no build-up, no gradual distancing, just a decisive rupture that felt both sudden and inevitable. Those familiar with the situation whisper that William entered that critical briefing carrying what insiders now describe as a final truth dossier, a collection of concerns, patterns, and revelations that had been quietly building for months. The moment it was presented, everything changed. Meghan's standing within the royal structure did not fade. It shifted abruptly, as though a switch had been flipped behind closed doors. And yet, the silence from Charles III only deepened the mystery, leaving even seasoned royal watchers unsettled. Media outlets scrambled, interpretations collided, and speculation surged, but the palace remained unmoved, offering no clarity, only reinforcing the sense that something far more serious had unfolded beneath the surface. And as the weight of that realization began to settle, one truth became impossible to ignore. This decision did not appear overnight. It had been building quietly, carefully, in the shadows. But this decision didn't begin with that announcement, it started months earlier, in whispers too dangerous to surface. For months, something didn't sit right with William. Reports suggest that behind the polished public appearances and carefully controlled narratives, there were inconsistencies that refused to disappear. Different interpretations of private briefings hinted at a deeper issue, one that could not be explained away by simple misunderstandings. Insiders whisper that tensions between William and Meghan had reached a level where silence itself became suspicious. It was not loud, not explosive, but steady, persistent, and quietly escalating. Allegations tied to trust, loyalty, and the unspoken rules of royal protocol began to surface in fragments, each one seemingly small, but together forming a pattern too significant to ignore. Those close to the inner workings of the palace suggest that William began quietly assembling information, not in a dramatic confrontation, but through careful observation, consultation, and verification. The process was deliberate, almost methodical, as though he understood that whatever he uncovered would carry consequences far beyond a single relationship. Sources claim there were moments when he hesitated, aware of the magnitude of what such a revelation could mean, not just for the individuals involved, but for the stability of the institution itself. And yet, the deeper he looked, the clearer it became that this was no longer something that could be contained. The truth, whatever form it took, demanded acknowledgement. And the moment William reportedly realized that silence was no longer an option, the course of events began to shift irreversibly. But uncovering the truth was only the beginning. What came next would fracture the family in ways no one expected. The room fell silent as the truth was laid out. No raised voices, just a chilling stillness that signaled something irreversible had just happened. Those familiar with the meeting describe it as controlled, almost unnervingly calm, yet heavy with implications that no one present could ignore. Reports suggest that William presented his findings with precision, leaving little room for doubt or dismissal. Each detail, each point, reportedly built upon the last, forming a narrative that could no longer be brushed aside as speculation. Charles III, according to various interpretations, appeared visibly conflicted, caught between personal ties and institutional responsibility. It was not a moment of anger, but of realization, the kind that forces decisions no one wants to make. Senior advisors, long accustomed to navigating delicate situations, reportedly maintained their composure, but insiders claim the weight of what was being discussed was unmistakable. There was no dramatic confrontation, no sudden outburst, only the quiet understanding that something fundamental had shifted. The idea that this situation could be quietly managed, contained behind closed doors, began to dissolve. What had once been treated as a sensitive internal matter now demanded a decisive response. And as the meeting drew to its unspoken conclusion, The realization settled across the room that whatever came next would not be temporary. It would define the future. And yet, even at that moment, no one fully understood how far this decision would go. It wasn't just a distancing, it wasn't symbolic. What happened next was something far more final, something that insiders say had never been executed this way before. Reports suggest that Meghan's removal was not a gradual process, but an immediate restructuring of her position within the royal framework. Privileges, access, and formal recognition were reportedly adjusted with a level of precision that indicated careful planning behind the scenes. It was not simply about public perception, it was about redefining boundaries. Those familiar with palace operations suggest that internal references, protocols, and even the way Meghan was acknowledged within official channels underwent a quiet but significant transformation. Comparisons to past royal separations quickly emerged, but insiders insist this situation carried a different weight, a sharper edge that set it apart. The implications extended beyond personal dynamics, touching on the very structure of how the monarchy operates. And while the public saw only fragments of the story, the internal reality appeared far more complex. The decision, though controlled and measured, carried a finality that could not be ignored. Yet even as Meghan's position shifted, the ripple effects began to spread, reaching beyond the immediate situation and into the lives of those closest to it. But while Meghan's position shifted overnight, the ripple effects were only just beginning. At the center of it all stood Prince Harry, torn between loyalty, love, and a reality he could no longer ignore. Reports suggest that Harry was not entirely removed from the process, but neither was he fully in control of it. Different interpretations indicate that he may have been informed at a critical moment, forced to confront a situation that had already moved beyond his influence. Insiders whisper that the emotional weight of the decision was profound, placing him in a position where every choice carried consequences. On one side stood his personal commitments, his relationship, his identity beyond the monarchy. On the other stood the institution he was born into, the structure that defined his role for much of his life. The tension between these two worlds became impossible to reconcile. Those familiar with his situation suggest that this moment represents more than a single event. It marks a turning point, one that could shape his future in ways that are still unfolding. Speculation continues about how he will respond, whether he will attempt to bridge the divide or move further away from it. And as that uncertainty lingers, the broader implications begin to take shape, raising questions not just about Harry's path, but about the direction of the monarchy itself. But the deeper consequence wasn't just about Harry, it was about the future of the monarchy itself. Behind the scenes, the monarchy began to shift quietly, deliberately, and with a precision that revealed just how serious this moment truly was. Reports suggest that internal adjustments were set in motion almost immediately, reflecting a broader effort to stabilize and reinforce the institution. Those familiar with palace operations indicate that this was not a reaction, but a recalibration, a strategic response designed to protect the monarchy's long-term structure. William's role, according to insiders, became more defined, more decisive, signaling a transition toward a future shaped by clarity and control. The focus on a streamlined, core working royal structure appeared to intensify, reinforcing the idea that the monarchy must adapt to maintain its relevance. Subtle messaging, both internal and external, began to emerge, emphasizing stability, continuity, and the importance of unity. Yet beneath that controlled surface, the significance of the moment was unmistakable. This was not just about one decision, it was about redefining the boundaries of the institution itself. And as those changes took hold, the question of what would come next began to grow louder, echoing beyond the palace walls. But even as the institution recalibrated, the question remained, what happens next? Across the world, reactions poured in shock, disbelief, and a flood of questions that no official statement could fully answer. Media outlets raced to piece together the story, each interpretation adding a new layer to an already complex narrative. Public opinion quickly divided, with some viewing the decision as necessary, others questioning its implications. Social media erupted with speculation, theories, and emotional responses, transforming the situation into a global conversation. Royal commentators offered conflicting perspectives, each attempting to make sense of what had occurred behind closed doors. The scale of the reaction extended far beyond the United Kingdom, drawing attention from audiences around the world. And as the story continued to evolve, it became increasingly clear that the palace could not fully control how it was perceived. The narrative had taken on a life of its own, shaped not just by facts, but by interpretation, emotion, and speculation. Yet beneath all of that noise, a deeper truth began to emerge, one that went beyond headlines and reactions. But beneath the headlines and reactions, a deeper truth was beginning to take shape. In the end, this wasn't just about Meghan. It was about something far bigger, something William knew he couldn't afford to lose. Reports suggest that his decision was driven not by personal conflict, but by a sense of responsibility to the institution itself. The idea of duty over personal relationships, long associated with the monarchy, appeared to take precedence once again. Those familiar with the situation indicate that this moment may define William's path moving forward, shaping how he approaches leadership and legacy. The implications extend beyond the present, influencing how the royal family will operate in the years to come. It is a reminder that within the monarchy, every decision carries weight, every action contributes to a larger narrative. And as this chapter closes, another begins, one marked by control, clarity, and a renewed focus on the future. Because in the world of the crown, decisions like this are never just endings, they are the beginning of something far more consequential. For months, something didn't sit right with William, Prince of Wales. Reports, inconsistencies, private briefings, each one pointing toward a truth the palace had tried desperately to contain. It was not one moment, not one revelation, but a slow, unsettling accumulation that refused to fade into the background. Insiders whisper that what began as minor concerns quickly evolved into something far more complex, as if every answer only led to another question. Behind closed doors, tensions between William and Meghan Markle reportedly grew sharper, though never openly explosive, existing instead in that dangerous space where silence speaks louder than confrontation. Different interpretations of internal discussions suggest that conflicting narratives were quietly presented to the palace, each version of events clashing with the next, creating a sense of instability that could no longer be ignored. Those familiar with the situation describe an atmosphere where trust became uncertain, where even routine interactions carried an undercurrent of doubt. Allegations tied to loyalty and royal protocol began to surface in fragments, not as accusations shouted in public, but as concerns carefully passed between advisors, each one adding weight to an already growing unease. And through it all, William did not react impulsively. Instead, reports suggest he moved with deliberate caution, quietly assembling information from multiple sources, cross-checking details, and testing the consistency of what he was being told. It was a process that required patience, restraint, and an understanding of just how high the stakes truly were. There are whispers of documents reviewed, conversations revisited, and moments re-examined, as if he were piecing together something that had been deliberately kept just out of reach. The idea of evidence began to emerge not in a dramatic reveal, but in a steady realization that the situation was far more serious than anyone had initially believed. Those close to the inner circle suggest there was a moment, subtle yet decisive, when William's perspective shifted completely. A moment when hesitation gave way to clarity, when the weight of what he had uncovered made it impossible to remain silent any longer. And in that instant, the direction of everything that followed was set in motion, quietly but irrevocably. But uncovering the truth was only the beginning. What came next would fracture the family in ways no one expected. The room fell silent as the truth was laid out. No raised voices, just a chilling stillness that signaled something irreversible had just happened. Inside that private meeting, where William, Prince of Wales, sat across from Charles III and a handful of the most trusted senior advisors, the atmosphere carried a weight that could not be ignored. Reports suggest that what was presented in that room was not speculation, not rumor, but a carefully assembled account of actions, decisions, and patterns that had been quietly building over time. Each detail, according to insiders, was laid out with precision, forming a narrative that demanded attention and, more importantly, demanded a response. There were no interruptions, no attempts to deflect or dilute what was being revealed. Instead, those present reportedly absorbed it in silence, as though they understood that reacting too quickly might only complicate what was already a deeply complex situation. Different interpretations of that moment describe Meghan Markle's actions being presented in full context, not as isolated incidents, but as part of a broader pattern that raised difficult questions about trust and alignment with the institution. The emotional reactions, if there were any, remained tightly controlled. This was not a room for outbursts. It was a room where decisions carried consequences that would echo far beyond the walls in which they were made. Those familiar with the palace hierarchy suggest that maintaining composure was not just expected, it was essential. Because once emotion took over, clarity would be lost. And clarity was exactly what this moment required. And yet, beneath that composed exterior, something far more intense was unfolding. Reports describe Charles as visibly conflicted, not in a dramatic sense, but in a quieter, more profound way. A man caught between personal connection and institutional duty, forced to confront a reality he may not have been ready to accept. Insiders whisper that his silence spoke volumes, that the weight of the information presented left little room for denial, yet demanded a decision that carried emotional cost. It was not just about what had happened, it was about what acknowledging it would mean. As the discussion continued, the structure of the monarchy itself seemed to hover in the background, influencing every thought, every pause, every unspoken realization. The palace hierarchy, long built on tradition and control, found itself facing a moment where hesitation could no longer be justified. Reports suggest that what had once been considered manageable, something that could be quietly addressed and contained, had now reached a point where inaction was no longer an option. The idea of keeping this situation behind closed doors began to dissolve, replaced by the understanding that whatever decision was made would have to reflect not just personal judgment, but institutional responsibility. And as that realization settled in, the shift became undeniable. This was no longer a question of whether something needed to be done, it was a question of how far they were willing to go. The silence in that room was no longer just about absorbing information. It was about confronting the inevitability of what came next. Because once a truth like this is acknowledged, it cannot be unacknowledged. Once a line is seen clearly, it cannot be unseen. And in that moment, without a single word needing to confirm it, the direction of everything that followed had already begun to take shape. And yet, even at that moment, no one fully understood how far this decision would go. It wasn't just a distancing, it wasn't symbolic. What happened next was something far more final, something that insiders say had never been executed this way before. The shift was immediate, precise, and deeply consequential, as if a long-prepared mechanism had finally been set into motion. Reports suggest that Meghan Markle's position within the royal framework was not gradually reduced, but decisively redefined, with formal structures quietly adjusting around her absence. What had once been assumed permanent suddenly appeared conditional, subject to the authority of an institution that had now chosen to act. Those familiar with internal operations whisper that key royal structures, those governing roles, responsibilities, and recognition, were swiftly recalibrated, removing her from positions that had once symbolized inclusion. It was not loud, not public, but it was unmistakable. Insiders claim that changes to titles, privileges, and access were among the first measures implemented, not as isolated actions, but as part of a coordinated response that reflected the seriousness of the situation. The language used within official channels reportedly shifted as well, subtle yet powerful, redefining how Meghan was referenced in ways that signaled a clear and deliberate boundary. These were not symbolic gestures, they were structural adjustments, designed to reinforce a new reality. And while the palace offered no detailed explanation, those watching closely began to recognize the pattern. This was not reactionary. This was controlled, calculated, and deeply intentional. Comparisons to past royal separations quickly surfaced, but insiders insist this moment carried a sharper edge, a level of finality that set it apart. Previous departures, however significant, often unfolded over time, shaped by negotiation and public messaging. This, however, appeared different. Reports suggest that the consequences were implemented with a level of immediacy that left little room for interpretation. It was not about managing perception, it was about establishing clarity. And that clarity came with a cost. Because once such a decision is made, it does not exist in isolation. It reshapes relationships, expectations, and the very structure of how the monarchy presents itself to the world. As details remained tightly controlled, public curiosity intensified. Media outlets searched for confirmation, analysts debated implications, and speculation filled the gaps left by official silence. The absence of clear communication did not quiet the conversation, it amplified it. Every small detail, every subtle shift became a point of analysis, feeding a narrative that continued to grow beyond the palace's control. And yet, within that controlled silence, the message was unmistakable. Something fundamental had changed. Not temporarily, not conditionally, but in a way that suggested permanence. And as the weight of that realization began to settle, the broader impact started to emerge. Because a decision of this magnitude does not end with one individual. It extends outward, influencing those connected, those affected, and those watching from a distance. The structure had shifted, but the consequences were still unfolding, moving quietly beneath the surface, waiting to reveal themselves in ways no one could fully predict. But while Meghan's position shifted overnight, the ripple effects were only just beginning. At the center of it all stood Prince Harry, torn between loyalty, love, and a reality he could no longer ignore. Reports suggest that the moment he became aware of what had unfolded was not carefully staged or softened, but abrupt, arriving either just before or during the decision itself, leaving little time to process what it truly meant. Those familiar with the situation whisper that Harry was not shielded from the truth, but neither was he given the space to reshape it. Instead, he found himself standing at the intersection of two worlds that were pulling further apart with every passing moment. On one side was his commitment to Meghan Markle, a bond that had already been tested under intense scrutiny. On the other was the institution that had defined his identity since birth, now shifting in a way that seemed to leave him increasingly on the outside looking in. Insiders suggest that the pressure from both sides was not loud or confrontational, but deeply internal, manifesting as a quiet conflict that could not be easily resolved. There were no simple answers, no clear path forward, only a growing awareness that whatever choice he made would carry consequences that could not be undone. Speculation about his emotional state quickly intensified, with different interpretations painting a picture of a man caught between defiance and reflection. Some suggest he remained resolute, unwilling to compromise on personal loyalty. Others hint at a more complex reaction, one shaped by the weight of everything he stood to lose. And in the absence of direct confirmation, those interpretations continued to evolve, each one adding another layer to an already intricate narrative. What became increasingly evident, however, was the widening distance between Harry and the royal institution itself. Reports suggest that this moment did not create that divide, but rather exposed it, bringing into focus a separation that had been quietly developing over time. The roles he once held, the responsibilities that once defined him, now seemed uncertain, as if they belonged to a version of his life that no longer aligned with the present. Questions about his future role or whether such a role would even exist began to surface with greater urgency. Those familiar with the inner workings of the monarchy suggest that clarity on this issue was not immediate, leaving Harry in a state of limbo where the past and the future seemed equally out of reach. And yet, beneath all the speculation and uncertainty, one idea continued to surface with quiet persistence: that this could be the most defining moment of his life. Not because of the decision itself, but because of what it demanded from him. A choice, a direction, a willingness to accept the consequences of standing on one side of a divide that may never fully close. Insiders whisper that moments like this do not simply pass, they reshape everything that follows. And as Harry stood at the center of it all, the weight of that realization began to settle in ways that no one outside could fully understand. Because this was not just about what had been lost, but about what could never be reclaimed. But the deeper consequence wasn't just about Harry, it was about the future of the monarchy itself. Behind the scenes, the monarchy began to shift quietly, deliberately, and with a precision that revealed just how serious this moment truly was. What appeared calm on the surface masked a deeper transformation, one that insiders suggest had already been set in motion long before the public even sensed a change. Reports indicate that internal restructuring within royal operations began almost immediately, not in sweeping announcements, but in subtle adjustments that carried significant weight. Roles were reassessed, responsibilities refined, and lines of authority quietly redrawn. It was not chaos, it was control. And at the center of this recalibration stood William, Prince of Wales, emerging not through declaration, but through action, as a more decisive figure shaping the direction of what comes next. Those familiar with the inner workings of the palace suggest that this moment marked a turning point in William's evolution, not just as an heir, but as a leader already stepping into the weight of future responsibility. His approach, described by some as measured yet firm, reflected a growing determination to reinforce the structure of the monarchy at a time when uncertainty threatened to weaken it. The concept of a core working royal framework reportedly gained renewed focus, emphasizing clarity, commitment, and alignment with the institution's long-standing principles. This was not about exclusion for its own sake, it was about definition, about drawing boundaries that could sustain the monarchy through periods of instability. At the same time, the palace began sending subtle but unmistakable signals, not through dramatic statements or public confrontations, but through controlled messaging that reinforced stability and continuity. Appearances, engagements, and internal communications were carefully aligned, creating a narrative that suggested strength without needing to declare it. Reports suggest that these efforts were designed not just to manage the immediate situation, but to shape how the monarchy would be perceived in the long term. Because perception, in moments like these, becomes as critical as reality. Efforts to stabilize public confidence reportedly became a priority, with advisors working to ensure that the institution appeared steady, composed, and focused. There was an understanding, insiders whisper, that uncertainty could spread quickly if left unchecked, and that the monarchy's greatest strength lay in its ability to project continuity even in times of change. This was not about denying what had happened, it was about controlling how it was understood. And in doing so, the palace demonstrated a level of strategic awareness that underscored just how seriously it viewed the situation. Yet beneath this carefully managed recalibration, a deeper adaptation was taking place. The monarchy was not simply responding, it was evolving, adjusting its structure and approach to protect its long-term image and relevance. Every decision, every adjustment, seemed to carry a forward-looking intention, as though this moment was being used to prepare for challenges yet to come. And while the surface remained composed, the significance of what was unfolding could not be ignored. Because when an institution as historic as the monarchy begins to shift in this way, it signals more than a response, it signals transformation. But even as the institution recalibrated, the question remained, what happens next? Across the world, reactions poured in shock, disbelief, and a flood of questions that no official statement could fully answer. The moment the news began to circulate, it spread with a force that even the palace could not contain, moving beyond controlled narratives and into the unpredictable space of global attention. Media outlets raced against time, scrambling to confirm details, cross-check sources, and piece together a story that seemed to shift with every new revelation. Reports suggest that even seasoned royal correspondents found themselves navigating uncertainty, as fragments of information emerged without clear context. What had started as a contained internal decision now unfolded on an international stage, where every detail, confirmed or not, became part of a rapidly evolving narrative. Public opinion, as expected, did not settle into a single perspective. Instead, it fractured, dividing audiences into those who viewed the decision as necessary and those who questioned its implications. Some interpretations framed it as a long-overdue step to protect the institution, while others saw it as a moment of profound personal consequence that raised uncomfortable questions about loyalty and belonging. This division did not remain quiet, it intensified. Conversations grew louder, more emotional, more complex, as individuals attempted to make sense of what they believed had happened behind closed doors. And in that process, the story expanded far beyond the original decision, becoming something larger, something more symbolic. Social media, in particular, became a powerful amplifier, turning speculation into a constant, shifting dialogue. Theories emerged at a relentless pace, each one offering a different explanation, a different interpretation, a different version of events. Some claimed hidden motives, others pointed to long-standing tensions, while many simply tried to connect the dots in a situation that refused to present a clear picture. The speed at which these narratives spread made it increasingly difficult to separate what was grounded from what was imagined, yet that did not slow the momentum. If anything, it accelerated it, pulling more voices into the conversation, each adding another layer to an already intricate story. Royal commentators entered the discussion with their own perspectives, but even among them, agreement proved elusive. Reports suggest that interpretations varied widely, with some emphasizing institutional necessity, while others highlighted the personal dimension of the decision. This lack of consensus only deepened the intrigue, reinforcing the idea that the truth, whatever it may be, was far more complex than any single explanation could capture. And as those interpretations circulated, they shaped how the story was understood, not just within the United Kingdom, but across the world. International attention amplified the situation even further, transforming it from a royal matter into a global event. Audiences far removed from the palace found themselves drawn into the narrative, captivated by its emotional intensity and its broader implications. What had once been a private decision now carried public weight on a scale that few could have anticipated. And as that attention continued to grow, one reality became increasingly clear: the story was no longer entirely within the palace's control. It had taken on a life of its own, shaped by perception, emotion, and interpretation. But beneath the headlines and reactions, a deeper truth was beginning to take shape. In the end, this wasn't just about Meghan Markle. It was about something far bigger, something William, Prince of Wales, knew he couldn't afford to lose. By the time the dust began to settle, the narrative had already shifted from a personal conflict to a defining moment for the monarchy itself. Reports suggest that William's decision, however difficult, was framed not through emotion but through responsibility, a calculated move driven by the understanding that the institution must always come first. Those familiar with the inner workings of the palace whisper that this was never just about resolving a single situation. It was about protecting a future that could not withstand prolonged uncertainty. And in that realization, the weight of duty began to overshadow everything else. The idea of duty over personal relationships, long embedded in royal history, appeared to re-emerge with renewed intensity. This was not a symbolic gesture or a temporary stance. It was a clear message about priorities, about where the line is drawn when the stability of the monarchy is at stake. Insiders suggest that this moment forced a quiet but powerful reaffirmation of values that have guided the institution for generations. Personal bonds, however meaningful, could not be allowed to compromise the structure that holds everything together. And while that truth carried an undeniable emotional cost, it also reinforced the very foundation upon which the monarchy stands. As the implications of the decision began to unfold, it became clear that its impact would extend far beyond the present. The royal family structure itself, according to various interpretations, may never return to what it once was. Adjustments made in response to this moment are likely to shape how roles are defined, how responsibilities are distributed, and how the institution presents itself moving forward. This was not just a reaction, it was a recalibration, one that could influence the monarchy for years, perhaps even decades, to come. And beneath those structural changes, the silent influence of legacy and tradition continued to guide every step, reminding those involved that they were not just making decisions for today, but for a future that must remain intact. For William, this moment is widely seen as more than a challenge. It is a defining chapter in his path toward kingship. Reports suggest that the way he navigated this situation, balancing personal complexity with institutional clarity, has solidified perceptions of him as a leader prepared to carry the weight of what lies ahead. It is in moments like these, insiders say, that the true nature of leadership is revealed not in comfort, but in conflict, not in certainty, but in the willingness to act despite uncertainty. And as this chapter closes, the image that begins to take shape is one of a future king, shaped not just by tradition, but by experience. At the same time, the monarchy itself appears to be entering a new era, one defined by control, precision, and a heightened awareness of its own vulnerability. The lessons drawn from this moment are unlikely to be forgotten, influencing how the institution approaches challenges in the future. There is a sense, subtle but unmistakable, that the boundaries have been redrawn, that expectations have been clarified, and that the cost of crossing those boundaries has been firmly established. And while the surface may return to a sense of calm, the underlying shift remains, quietly reshaping the path forward. Because in the world of the crown, decisions like this are never just endings. They are the beginning of something far more consequential. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.